The first time I saw him, I thought he was a ghost. The second time, I realized he was worse than that. He was alive. It was the kind of night small towns in America like to pretend doesn't exist. The streets were empty, neon lights buzzing over the liquor store across from the gas station. And I was walking home, fists jammed in my hoodie pocket, pretending I didn't hear my own father's voice echoing in my head. You'll never be enough. Not for this family. Not for anyone. Then there he was, standing at the broken fence near the abandoned house on Cypress Street, his silhouette cut sharp against the streetlight like something ripped out of a nightmare. Black hair that fell into his eyes. A stillness so unnatural it made my skin crawl. And yet I couldn't look away. "Do you live here?" I asked, more to break the silence than anything else. His lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder, lonelier. "I don't live anywhere. I should have walked away. I should have pretended I never saw him. But instead I stayed. Maybe because there was something in his voice I recognized. The same kind of ache that hollowed me out at night, when I couldn't breathe under the weight of my own thoughts. That was the beginning. The moment I cracked the gate open without realizing it, letting something dark, fragile, and impossible slip into my life. He told me his name was Eli. Just Eli. No last name, no explanation. He showed up at the strangest times, by the river, near the school parking lot, at the diner where I worked weekends. Always in the shadows, always watching. And somehow, little by little, I let him in. I didn't tell my parents. God, no. My father would have ripped me apart for bringing home a stray dog, let alone another boy who looked like sin in human skin. My mom would have lowered her eyes, whispered prayers under her breath, and pretended she didn't notice. But Eli wasn't just some boy. He carried with him an air of tragedy, like his very existence was stitched from grief. Some nights, I'd find him sitting at the edge of my porch, staring out at nothing, whispering words I couldn't hear. When I asked him what haunted him, he only said, "The world doesn't want me. But maybe you do." And damn it, I did. The town didn't make it easy. In a place where everyone knows everyone, secrets rot faster than fruit. Whispers followed us. Two boys seen too close at the football field, too quiet in the library corner, too often slipping into the back of my old truck parked by the woods. "Queer," someone spat at me behind the bleachers. "Freak," another voice hissed. I laughed it off like it didn't matter, but it did. It mattered every second. Every glance, every snicker, every shove in the hallway burned into my skin until I felt raw. And through it all, Eli never flinched. He would look at me with those haunted eyes and say, "Let them drown in their own poison. You and me, we're not theirs to destroy." Sounded brave, but I was the coward. I was the one who went home every night, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, hating the boy who couldn't stand tall enough to protect the only person who'd ever really seen him. One night, the breaking point came. It was after another fight with my father. His words were knives, sharp and merciless. "You'll never be a man if you keep acting like this. You'll never belong. You're already a disappointment." I left before he could finish. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove to the abandoned house where Eli waited. He was there, as always, sitting on the porch like he'd been expecting me. When he saw my face, he didn't ask questions. He just pulled me down beside him. "You don't have to explain," he said quietly. And for the first time, I broke. The tears came fast, hot, angry. I told him everything. How I felt like a ghost in my own home. How I couldn't breathe under the weight of their expectations. How sometimes I wondered if disappearing would be easier. Eli didn't try to comfort me with lies. He just pressed his forehead to mine, whispering, "I'm here. Even if the world burns you alive, I'm here." That was the night I kissed him. And God help me, It felt like I had finally opened a door I'd been pounding on my whole life. But love in the shadows doesn't stay hidden for long. Rumors turned into accusations. My father found out. The rage in his eyes that night could have set the whole town on fire. He called me every word a son should never hear from his father. He told me Eli was a curse, that he was dragging me straight to hell. And when I tried to fight back, when I shouted that Eli was the only thing keeping me alive, his hand came down across my face. I left that house and never went back. Eli found me trembling behind the wheel of my truck, the mark still burning on my skin. He touched it gently, his fingers trembling, and whispered, "You don't deserve this. You deserve more." And I realized in that moment, I wasn't just fighting for love. I was fighting for survival. That was how the gate of darkness opened wide. Not because Eli was a ghost, not because he haunted me, but because he showed me the truth, that the real haunting came from the world that tried to erase us, from the voices that told us we weren't enough, from the fists that demanded we stay silent. Eli wasn't my curse. He was my salvation. And maybe, just maybe, I could be his too. They say when you run from one kind of darkness, you usually crash straight into another. I didn't understand that until I found myself sitting in Eli's truck at 2 in the morning. Headlights off, silence thick enough to choke on. The air smelled like gasoline and damp earth. Eli didn't look at me, not once. His profile was sharp against the faint glow of the dashboard lights, jaw tight, eyes narrowed at something I couldn't see. "I can't go back there," I finally said, my voice breaking in the middle. "Not tonight. Maybe not ever." He didn't answer right away. He just reached over, slowly, carefully, and rested his hand on mine. His skin was cold, almost too cold, but I clung to it like a lifeline. "Then don't," he whispered. "You don't have to go back to where you're not wanted." Those words were simple, but they cut through the panic like a blade. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe I could just disappear into the night, forget my father's voice, forget the way his hand felt against my skin. But a part of me, the broken, conditioned part, kept whispering, "You can't run. You'll never escape who you are." Eli drove us out to the edge of town, where the road turned to gravel and the stars seemed sharper. We parked near the river, the one that cut like a scar through the valley. The water caught the moonlight, silver and restless. "This is my favorite place," Eli said softly. "When it feels like the world is suffocating me, I come here. The water listens. It doesn't judge." I followed him out of the truck. The grass was wet, soaking into my shoes, but I didn't care. We sat by the riverbank, shoulders brushing, silence heavy. I could feel the weight of his secrets pressing against me, the things he hadn't told me. "Why don't you ever talk about your past?" I asked. He hesitated. His eyes stayed fixed on the water, but his voice was low, almost broken. "Because my past isn't mine anymore. It was stolen, rewritten. All I have left is these nights, these moments. And you." Something inside me cracked open at those words. I wanted to pull him closer, to promise him forever, but I was too afraid of scaring him away. So instead, I let the silence speak for us. When he finally turned, his eyes were glistening, catching the moonlight like shards of glass. "Do you know why I stay around you, Noah?" The sound of my name in his voice sent shivers through me. "Because for the first time in a long time," he said, "I feel like I'm not completely invisible." The days blurred after that. We lived in the in-between. At school, I pretended to be the version of myself the world demanded, quiet, unremarkable, straight. At night, I slipped into Eli's shadow, the only place I could breathe. It wasn't perfect. The whispers grew louder, sharper. My so-called friends drifted away, choosing the safety of conformity over the danger of being associated with me. Teachers watched with suspicious eyes. and my father, I stopped answering his calls. I knew what waited on the other side of his voice. Shame, disgust, disappointment. But in all of that, Eli became my anchor. He'd sit with me in the diner's back booth while I worked late shifts, stealing fries off my plate. He'd drag me out to the woods just to lay on the grass and count stars. He'd look at me sometimes like he was memorizing my face, and I swear it felt like I was being seen for the first time in my life. And yet, underneath it all, I felt the storm building. The storm broke one Friday night. We were at the diner. It was past closing, the neon sign buzzing outside. Eli was leaning against the counter, smirking at me as I wiped down the tables. I tossed a rag at him. He dodged effortlessly, laughter spilling out of him, light and fleeting. That's when the door slammed open. My father stood there. The air froze. My chest caved in on itself. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not here, not with Eli watching. His eyes found me first, then flicked to Eli. Something ugly twisted in his face. "So it's true," he spat. "You're dragging your sickness out in public now." I felt every muscle in my body lock. My throat burned with words I couldn't speak. Eli stepped forward, calm but sharp. "Leave him alone." My father's face darkened, veins straining in his neck. "And who the hell are you to tell me anything? You think you belong here? You're nothing, just a stray nobody. And you," his finger stabbed toward me, "you're worse. You're my shame." The words ripped through me, each one a wound. For a second, I thought I might collapse. But then Eli moved. He placed himself between me and my father, eyes blazing. "You don't get to break him anymore. You've done enough." Something shifted inside me then. Something I didn't even know I had. My voice shook, but I forced it out. "He's right. You don't get to decide who I am. Not anymore." My father stared at me, as if he didn't recognize the boy standing in front of him. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed out, the bell above the diner door shrieking in his wake. I collapsed onto the counter. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely breathe. Eli sat beside me, his presence solid and grounding. "You did it," he whispered. "No," I said, shaking my head. "We did it." For the first time in forever, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel. Hope. But hope is fragile in a town built on fear. The next week was hell. My father spread his venom like wildfire, and the town ate it up. People whispered louder, stared longer. Someone spray-painted slurs across the diner's back wall. My boss warned me that my choices were bad for business. And yet, through all of it, Eli stayed. He held my hand when no one was looking. He kissed me in the dark, gentle and desperate. He reminded me, every night, that I wasn't alone. But sometimes, I caught the shadows in his eyes, the way his hands shook when he thought I wasn't watching. He was fighting his own battles, ghosts I couldn't see. And I realized if I wanted to keep him, I had to fight for him too. One night, as we sat by the river, I finally asked the question that had haunted me since the beginning. "What are you so afraid of, Eli?" He went still, his eyes locked on the water, jaw tight. For a long time he said nothing. Then finally his voice cracked open. "I'm afraid that if you really knew me, if you knew the darkness I carry, you'd leave." I reached for his hand. He flinched, then let me take it. "I've already seen your darkness, and I'm still here." He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw him break. Not the cool, untouchable boy, just Eli, fragile, human, mine. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just falling in love. I was already gone. Secrets don't stay buried forever. They crawl out when you least expect them, clawing at the fragile walls you build around your life. With Eli, I knew he was hiding something. The way his voice sometimes broke mid-sentence. the way his eyes glazed when he stared too long into the dark. It was a silence too heavy to be coincidence. But I never pushed him, afraid that if I demanded answers, he'd vanish like smoke. Until the night everything cracked open. We were at the river again. It had become our sanctuary, our stolen piece of freedom. Eli was quiet, more than usual, his shoulders hunched as though carrying weight I couldn't see. I touched his hand, whispering, "Talk to me." He flinched, and then he laughed. Not the kind of laugh that warms your chest, but the hollow kind that makes you shiver. "You want to know who I am, Noah?" His voice was sharp, broken. "I'm nobody, a ghost. I don't exist the way you think I do." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" His eyes snapped to mine, fierce and desperate. "I was 16 when my family threw me out. My father found out. About me, about what I wanted, who I loved. He said I was dead to him. And in a way I've been drifting ever since. No home, no future, just surviving." The words hit me like a punch. 16. Homeless. Alone. I wanted to pull him into my arms, to erase every scar his family carved into him. But he wasn't done. "I thought I could disappear," he whispered, voice breaking. "But then I met you. And you're dangerous, Noah. Because you make me want to exist again. And I don't know if I can." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The river rushed beside us, relentless, like it wanted to drown the truth. Finally, I reached for him. "Eli, you don't scare me. Your past doesn't scare me. What scares me is losing you." His eyes flickered, wet and uncertain. "You say that now. But what happens when the whole world tells you I'm not worth it?" I squeezed his hand tighter. "Then I'll tell the whole world they're wrong." For the first time since I met him, Eli broke. He collapsed against me, his body trembling, his breath ragged in my ear. And in that fragile, trembling embrace, I realized this wasn't just love. It was war, and I was ready to fight it with him. But wars have casualties. Word of Eli's past started spreading. I didn't know how. Maybe someone overheard us. Maybe someone from his old life recognized him. But suddenly, whispers turned into stories. The boy who'd been thrown away. The boy whose family disowned him. Small towns thrive on blood. They fed on his shame, twisting it into poison they spat in our direction. At school, I found my locker defaced with words I won't repeat. At the diner, customers stared like I was diseased. One night, my boss cornered me in the back room. "You need to make a choice, Noah," he said, eyes hard. "That boy is trouble. If you keep bringing him around here, you'll lose more than your job. You'll lose your future." I quit on the spot. Because what good was a future if it meant abandoning Eli? Eli didn't take it well. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, pacing the abandoned house where he sometimes stayed. "You can't keep throwing your life away because of me." "It's not throwing away anything," I argued. "It's choosing. I'm choosing you." His hands trembled. He turned on me, eyes wild. "Don't you get it? I'm not safe. I've been running for years. Every time someone gets close to me, they end up hurt. I don't want that for you." My chest ached. "You don't get to decide what I want, Eli. You think you're darkness, but you're not. You're the only light I've ever had." He froze. For a moment, the fight drained from his face. Then, slowly, carefully, he whispered, "You don't know how much I needed to hear that." But fate wasn't about to let us breathe easy. One evening, as we sat on the roof of the abandoned house, watching the horizon bleed into night, headlights cut through the dark. Car pulled up, kicking gravel. And when the doors slammed shut, Eli went pale. 3 men stepped out, older, harder. One of them looked so much like Eli it made my blood run cold. "Eli," the man sneered, "you thought you could run forever?" My heart pounded. I looked at Eli, but his face was stone. "That's my brother," he whispered. The confrontation was brutal. Words were knives, each one sharper than the last. "You're dead to us," his brother spat. "You always will be, but you can't hide forever. People like you don't get happy endings." I wanted to fight, to scream, to tell them they were monsters, but Eli just stood there, shoulders squared, eyes burning. "You're wrong," he said, voice steady. "Because for the first time, I've found someone who sees me, someone who loves me, and that's more than you ever gave me." His brother lunged, fury in his face. But I moved. I stood between them, chest heaving. "You don't get to hurt him anymore. If you want him, you go through me." For a heartbeat, silence. Then laughter, cold, cruel. They left, spitting curses into the night. When their car finally disappeared, Eli collapsed beside me, shaking. "Why would you do that?" he whispered. "Because you're worth it," I said. "Every fight, every bruise, every breath." And for the first time, Eli believed me. That night, under the stars, he kissed me like he was choosing life, like he was choosing me. And I knew then, no matter how dark the world became, we'd find a way through, together. There's a moment after a storm when the air feels too still, too clean, as if the world is holding its breath before the next strike. That's what the days after Eli's brother came felt like. He pretended nothing happened, but I saw it. The way his hands shook when he lit a cigarette, the way his eyes darted at every passing car, the way his body tensed when I touched him like he was bracing for something to break. "They won't stop," he muttered one night, pacing the floor of the abandoned house. His voice was low, almost a growl. "They'll come back. They'll make sure I never get to breathe easy again." I leaned against the cracked wall, watching him. "Then we fight. Together." He turned, anger flaring in his eyes. "You don't understand, Noah. They're not just my family. They're my curse. Everyone who's tried to help me, everyone, got burned. And I can't let that happen to you." "Eli," I said softly, stepping closer. "I'm already burned, and I don't regret it." His breath hitched. For a second, the fire in his eyes flickered into something else. Fear, longing, love tangled in one impossible knot. Then he looked away. "You're insane," he whispered. "Maybe," I said, brushing my hand against his, "but at least I'm insane for you." The whispers in town had turned into shouts. At school, someone shoved me into the lockers, spitting slurs in my face. At the diner, where I sometimes still sat in the corner to steal Wi-Fi, people stared until I couldn't breathe. Even at the grocery store, mothers pulled their children closer, as if I carried some kind of disease. But the worst wasn't them. It was my father. He hadn't called since that night at the diner. Not once. And a part of me ached even though I knew better. I hated that I still wanted his voice, even if it was just to tell me he hated me. Because silence was worse. Eli saw it. One evening, he found me sitting in my truck outside the diner, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. "He hasn't called," I muttered, not looking at him. Eli climbed in beside me, his presence steady. "Maybe that's a blessing. Or maybe it's proof," I whispered. "Proof I was never enough." He caught my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You're enough for me. Isn't that what matters?" The weight of his gaze burned through me. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. Then came the night of the fire. It was late, the streets nearly empty, when the sirens split the air. I followed the flashing lights until my chest caved in. The abandoned house, our house, flames devoured it, roaring into the night sky, painting everything red. Eli stood frozen beside me, his face pale, eyes wide. "They found us," he whispered. I grabbed his arm. "We have to go. Now." But he didn't move. He just stared at the fire, like it was swallowing not just the house but everything he'd ever been. "They'll never stop," he said, voice hollow. "Not until there's nothing left of me." I shook him. "No, that's what they want you to believe. But they don't get to decide your ending, Eli. You do." His eyes snapped to mine, wild and wet. For a heartbeat, I thought he might let the flames take him. Then he moved. He ran. And I ran with him. We ended up at the river, breathless, ash still clinging to our clothes. The water shimmered under the moonlight, mocking us with its calm. Eli collapsed on the grass, burying his face in his hands. "This is what I am, Noah. Destruction. Everywhere I go, something burns." I knelt beside him, pulling his hands away, forcing him to see me. "No, you're not the fire. You're what survives it." He stared at me, broken, like he wanted to believe but couldn't. So I kissed him, hard, fierce, desperate, the kind of kiss that tasted of smoke and salt and survival. When we pulled apart, he whispered, "Why me? Out of everyone, why did you choose me?" "Because," I said, my voice shaking, "you're the only thing in this world that makes me feel alive. But love doesn't erase fear. It only makes it sharper." The next day we sat in my truck, parked at the edge of town. Eli was quiet, staring at the horizon. "They'll come after you next," he said finally. I frowned. "Let them try." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I won't let you ruin your life for me." I grabbed his hand. "It's not ruin. It's love." He pulled away, his eyes burning. "You don't get it, Noah. Love doesn't win here. Not in this town. Not in this world." My chest cracked open. "Then we leave. We'll go somewhere else. Somewhere they can't touch us." He froze. His breath hitched. For the first time, I saw hope flicker across his face. "Do you mean that?" he whispered. "With everything I am," I said. That night, we started planning. Cities, jobs, cheap apartments. A life built from scratch, fragile and messy but ours. And for the first time, I saw Eli smile. Not the guarded smirk, not the hollow laugh, but a real smile. A smile that lit him from the inside out. But in the back of my mind, one truth echoed. The world doesn't let boys like us go without a fight. The night after everything came undone, the silence felt heavier than any storm. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a single mistake had carved such deep scars into both our lives. The world outside kept turning, but inside me, time had stopped the moment he looked at me with eyes full of betrayal and pain. Ethan didn't leave, though. That was the strangest part. He stayed. Even when the shadows lingered in the corners of the house, even when my guilt sat on the porch like an unwanted guest, he stayed. And every morning, when I opened my eyes, I saw him moving quietly through the kitchen, as if anchoring me back to the world. The gate of darkness I had foolishly opened, whether you believed in the spiritual or the metaphorical, was slowly closing. Not because I forced it shut, but because Ethan stood on the other side, holding it for me, refusing to let it swallow me whole. It wasn't immediate. Healing never is. We argued. We avoided each other. Sometimes we went days without speaking, except for the bare minimum needed to exist under the same roof. But then, there were small moments, like the time he left coffee on my desk without a word, or when I found him asleep on the couch waiting for me. That began weaving us back together. One evening, after weeks of this fragile dance, I found him on the porch. He was staring out at the fields, the sky painted in shades of fire and lavender. I hesitated before stepping closer, but something in me refused to retreat this time. "You should hate me," I said quietly. He turned, the fading light catching his profile. Maybe I did, for a while. And now, My voice cracked. Ethan looked at me for a long time, his eyes softer than I deserved. Now I think I just miss you. The words broke something open inside me. For months I had carried nothing but guilt and self-loathing. But hearing him say that, hearing him admit to missing me, was like breathing after nearly drowning. I crossed the space between us, my hands trembling as they hovered near his. For the first time in forever, he didn't pull away. His fingers brushed mine, tentative, searching. And when they finally interlaced, it felt like the world tilted back into place. The farmhouse became less of a prison and more of a sanctuary after that night. We began sharing pieces of ourselves again, the music we loved, the books we used to quote to each other, the ridiculous inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. Slowly, laughter returned to our walls. Slowly, we remembered who we were before the darkness tried to claim us. There were nights when he still woke up shaking, shadows clinging to his skin like a second layer. On those nights, I held him until his breathing steadied, whispering truths I wished I had spoken sooner. You're not alone. You've never been alone. I'm here, always. And there were nights when I broke, when the weight of everything I had unleashed threatened to crush me. And in those moments, it was Ethan who held me, pressing his forehead to mine, grounding me with the quiet strength that had drawn me to him from the start. By the time winter rolled into spring, the ghost that had haunted our hearts wasn't gone, but it was no longer in control. We were together. One afternoon, as we walked through the field behind the house, Ethan stopped suddenly. He turned to me, the breeze ruffling his hair, his eyes searching mine with a kind of fierce vulnerability. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Opening that gate, letting all of this in." I thought about it, the pain, the fear, the nights we thought we'd never make it through. And then I thought about the way his hand felt in mine, the way his laughter sounded like salvation, the way love had managed to survive even the darkest storm. "No," I said, my voice steady, "because it led me to you, and I'd walk through the darkness 1,000 times if it meant finding you again." Ethan smiled then, not the cautious half-smiles he used to give me, but a real one, bright and unguarded. And in that moment, I knew the darkness had lost. We stood there in the wide-open field, the sky endless above us, the earth steady beneath our feet, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. Because love, messy, complicated, terrifying love, had won, and no shadow in this world could ever take that away from us. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.